Hi everybody, Peter here once again. Thanks for joining me on my channel. Okay, it's a Saturday, it's story time once again. I've got 4 great stories lined up for you, but I've got to tell you, this could very well be one of the last videos where I tell you stories. The reason being is because I've actually exhausted them now. You guys have been great over the last year or so. You've sent me in a lot of stories. I've got the last 4 here, so unless anybody sends me some stories between now and next week, I'm going to have to come up with something else or think of, another subject to make videos about. But we've got 4 great stories for you today. Before I get into these 4 stories, I just wanted to say a big thanks to everybody who joined me on the live stream last Saturday. That went on for just over 2 hours. It was a great stream. I enjoyed it immensely. Had a couple of beers with you guys and I got to answer some of your questions. So if you're around this evening, I'll be back with a live stream tonight at 9 p.m. UK time. It'd be great to see you guys in the stream. I had over 200 people in the stream last Saturday, and as I said, it was very enjoyable, and I think the people in the stream enjoyed it as well. So hopefully I'll see you later this evening on that. But for now, let's get into these great stories.
สวัสดีค่ะ
So these 4 stories are a good selection. There's no car crashes this kind of week. There's no car crash stories with the bar goes, but they're 4 really interesting stories. There's the first 2 are fairly long, quite long, and the second 2 are shorter. Just a little background on the 4 stories. The first one is just really showing you the kindness of the Thai people. You know, there's a lot of stories out there about people getting ripped off and all the rest of it, and this guy's experiences, he's just nothing that lights any fireworks, as it were. It was just a trip to Thailand, but the way, from what he tells you, it just shows you that the Thais have got a big heart. The second story is a real funny story. As I get into it, you'll see what I mean. I was smiling all the way through it when I was reading it. The third story I've got for you today, it's about everything that was going on just before this worldwide pandemic, about a guy who was kind of trapped in on the islands. He did get out in the end, but it's just his story leading up to it, and he met a very nice girl on that trip. And the 4th story is quite funny as well. It's not a funny story, but you'll see what I mean when we get to that one. Okay, so let's not waste any more time. Let's jump straight into these. And the first story is the one I was mentioning just now about the kindness of the Thai people.
สถานีต่อไปนานา Next station Nana.
So here goes. First, a little background on myself. I am a male from the northeast of England. I'm in my late 30s. After a couple of failed relationships here in the UK, one of which took a few years to recover from on the financial side of things. Once able to afford to travel again, I quickly got bored of 2 weeks in Spain or Turkey holidays with my friends that we were doing at the time, flying to a different country just to spend 2 weeks sitting in an English bar. Got very boring very quickly. So about 8 to 10 years ago, I started traveling solo, first Western countries like the USA and Germany, then turning to the Middle East and India, and then finally Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Thailand and Cambodia so far, but hopefully I hope to get around to the other countries eventually. Southeast Asia has quickly become my favourite place to visit, even though I do tend to avoid the most tourist rowdy parts of the area. Below is a quick list of things I instantly think of when Thailand crops up. Delicious spicy food and exotic fruit, the smiles and friendly nature of the Thai people, the buzz you get riding around in a tuk-tuk or on the back of a motorbike taxi. Icing your beer. While I was sceptical against this at first, I realise now that it's a good way to keep your beer cool in a very hot country. The beauty of the country, the beaches, forests, mountains, temples and the ladies, of course. The heat, humidity and the smell of the country as soon as you step outside the airport. The snacks and drinks available in 7-Eleven. How close you always are to a 7-Eleven, the ease of travelling around the country, planes, trains, ferries, buses, taxis, all have frequent timetables and cheap costs, especially compared to the UK, many great temples and the Buddhist culture. And below are a couple of my experiences while I was in Thailand. So the first one. First trip to Thailand, my first real introduction to Thai food must have been the 3rd day. First day, right off from travelling. Second day, jet lagged in the morning and out drinking and celebrating being in Thailand. After overdoing it on the Chang the night before in Bangkok, wake up in the morning with a massive hangover. Friends were asleep and unaccounted for, so decided to go out of the hotel to find some food and drink. Not far off on a walk from the hotel, I found a little food cart, just a few tables, just a small table and a few chairs selling noodle soup. Now, after visiting Vietnam in the past, I was well aware and fond of having noodle soup in the morning to set me up for the day or cure a hangover, so I thought this small store was perfect and safe bet from previous experiences. So Julie ordered pork noodle soup. Yeah, why not? Throw in the fish bowls and whatever else normally comes with it. I'm not a picky eater. I tell the girl behind the counter and I sit down. Now, if you've not been to Vietnam, the food there is very similar to that of Thailand. Similar names, looks, ingredients, etc., except for one minor difference. Vietnamese food tends to go more towards herbs and citrus flavors. Very tasty, but not spicy. And any chili spice is normally from the tub of chili flakes or pickled chilies in jars on the table that you use yourself. So my big bowl of noodles arrived without thinking that it would be different to what I'd been happily eating in Vietnam in the past. I take a big mouthful of noodles, veg, meat and slurp on the broth. Wow, this was not the herby broth that I'd known in the neighbouring country, that I'd add a touch of chili to give it a bit of a kick. This was a full-blown, tongue-burning chili broth and I was choking with shock and from the heat. After the initial shock had worn off, half a bottle of Coke had gone and a little fish sauce and sugar had been added to the bowl, I was happily working my way through the bowl. This definitely made me forget about my hangover, cleared my head and started my love of the spicy food of Thailand, and all for about £1.50. My first experience of Thai massage, traditional kind, not the red light, dirty, soapy extras kind, on my first trip to Thailand. I travelled with 6 friends and I was the only newbie to Thailand. About a week into the trip, after a long minibus ride between cities the previous day, one of the guys and his wife suggested we should all get a massage that night before going out for food and drink to help the body get over the long flights a week ago and the long bus journeys yesterday. The majority view was it was a good idea, and it was duly arranged for 5 p.m. that afternoon. And although the two of us were a bit dubious, when we arrived at the massage shop, a few streets walk away from the hotel, there was a lot of talking between the couple who arranged it and the girls on reception, with a lot of people pointing, grinning, and laughing at me and the other guy who hadn't had one before. After it seemed like everything had been agreed at reception, 4 of the group went into one room and we went into the second room. The organizer from the couple went to the far room and told us that although the signs were advertising half-hour and 1-hour massage prices, we were in fact actually booked in for a 2-hour massage. And when we were questioned about past injuries, medical conditions, which seemed very strange for a girly massage. Why do they need all these questions for a nice gentle massage? Just if you've not been to Thailand before, sorry to cut in guys, but just to tell you, if you go for a traditional Thai massage, they give you a choice of a gentle massage or a real physical hardcore massage, which is quite tough on you, but it makes you feel good. Okay, on with the story. As the 3 of us took our places on the 3 tables that were ready for us, the organiser let slip that he'd not only asked for the longer 2-hour massage, but had also insisted on it being of the harder type used for sports enthusiasts, which I'm certainly not. That set my mind away, panicking a bit until I seen which one of the ladies was massaging me. She was short, under 5 foot, very slim, so surely wouldn't be able to make much of a dent in my large overweight body. So I started to relax and lie down. For the next 2 hours, that small petite Thai lady, who looked like a gust of wind would blow her over, proceeded to pound, pinch, nip, twist, knead, stretch and pull my body in directions and ways I didn't know it could. Her tiny hands had a strength and firmness that a boxer would dream of. It was definitely not a soft girly massage. It was 2 hours of pain and torture. Although I mainly closed my eyes and didn't let on to this pain, but the strange thing is that at the end of the 2 hours, I'd left the shop, my body felt great, and that night, with all the kinks and knots all worked out, I had the best night's sleep in years. Now, I know my friend set me up for the 2-hour slot, double what is normal, and asking for a very firm massage, but it was great. It was a great eye-opener and ultimately beneficial introduction to the traditional Thai massage. And while I don't normally go in for the 2-hour massage now, I do sometimes treat my aching body to a 1-hour massage. On my 3rd or 4th trip to Thailand, about halfway through my trip to Koh Samui for a few days, I started having problems with my mobile phone. While getting changed to go out one night, I'd had my phone plugged into charge while getting ready when I came to leave, and I noticed it hadn't charged. Being in a rush, I just assumed I'd plugged it in wrong and thought no more of it. The next morning, I woke up to find that again my phone hadn't charged. After plugging it in before going to sleep, after playing around with the wires and connectors and trying to find my partner's chargers, I had no luck and couldn't get my phone to charge. We knew there was a 7-Eleven next to the hotel, so we decided to go there and buy a new wire to try and see if that worked. When we arrived, my partner started talking to the 7-Eleven staff that showed us to the selection of chargers. After checking the size of the connectors, the guy from the 7-Eleven ripped open one of the packets and took my phone behind the counter to check if the connector would work on my phone. After the first one failed, he tried a second brand, which again failed. He apologised for not being able to help while repacking the connectors and putting them back on display to sell. He then told my partner of a nearby phone shop a few streets away that might be of more help. The staff were so helpful and friendly, they could have easily just showed me the cables, took the cash and be done with it, but they went out of their way to help, and as a result of the help, didn't make a sale. Although the amount of iced coffee and cheese and ham and toasties I'd bought there probably made up for their missed sale. We went to the phone shop that the guy in 7-Eleven told us about. The store assistant in there proceeded to check with the different cables they had available with no success. He took a closer look at the charger socket and guessed that the problem was with the actual connector coming loose. With this being a relatively new Samsung phone, not widely available yet, he told me and my partner that he doesn't stock the parts and would have to send away for the parts, which would take a few days, maybe a week. But again, robbing himself of a sale, he told us about an actual official Samsung store in a large shopping mall about half an hour's drive away. That with it being an official flagship store, may be more likely to either hold the parts or get them to me quicker. After giving our thanks and telling him we would take his advice and give the shopping mall a try, saying goodbyes, he then took us across the street and along the road to a bus stop and told us which bus to get to the shopping mall. When we arrived at the shopping mall, sure enough, we found the store on the first floor, and again, after my partner explained the situation, the Samsung store staff proceeded to check both phones and my connectors over. They come to the same conclusion that the problem was the connector inside my phone. The staff explained that they could send it away to be fixed and it would be covered under the warranty that came with my phone. Even though it was bought in another country, however, it would involve sending it away, fixing it and sending it back. I was already halfway through my 5-day trip to the island and knew that it wouldn't make it there and back before I went back to Isan for the rest of my holiday. The store staff said when it comes back from repair, they could send it on to our hotel in Isan if we left the address. I wasn't keen on this option as I'd never used the Thai postal service and wasn't sure on the reliability of it. I would be panicking if I didn't get it back before leaving for the UK. The staff understood my concerns and suggested that I could continue to charge my phone until I got home and had a chance to get it repaired. They said the best way around this was to get a wireless charging pad and use that as a temporary measure to charge my phone. They tested it on one and they had on display to make sure the feature worked on my phone, which it did. The shop sold them at an official Samsung store price, but the helpful Thais, again robbing themselves of a sale, told me that if I only wanted it for a temporary measure till I got home, then there was no need to pay out the 3,500 baht for an official Samsung branded wireless charger that they sold. They then told my partner of a few different shops and markets near the mall and near our hotel that sold normal versions that would work for a fraction of the price. We again thanked the staff, said our goodbyes and proceeded onto a mobile phone gadget stall in a nearby market and bought a wireless charging pad for 700 baht. It's still going strong 18 months later. After hearing lots of scare stories of how everyone is always out to rip you off when you go to Thailand, I think this goes to show that not all Thai people you meet are like this. And from my experience, the Thais are kind and helpful people. There was multiple times during this encounter where a local shop could have easily took the easy route, sold me something and be done with it. But time and time again, they took the time to go out of the way to help, even at the expense of not making a sale. And it's like I always say to you guys, you know, all these videos out there, and I've made them myself, 20 scams in Thailand, ways you get ripped off. It's very easy for people who have never been there before to get paranoid and think, oh, I'm not going to go there, it's really dangerous. But the Thais are very kind people. You've just got to keep your wits about you. And it's like being a tourist in any country. Thailand's no different. And as this person who's written this story to me has pointed out, you know, the Thais do have a very kind side and a big heart.
Next station, Siam, interchange with Sukhumvit line. Doors will open on the right-hand side of the train.
Now this second story, it's quite a funny story. It starts off a little bit serious and it ends in a serious tone. But you'll see what I mean. It put a big smile on my face when I read it, and I hope it does yours as well. So this story, the title of this story is called A Trip to See a Fortune Teller. And here we go. So off we trundled, my sweetheart and I, to the old Siam Plaza. We spent the next hour taking in the colourful sights and sounds of the market. The streets were a noisy maze of pedestrians, bicycles, motorcycles, tuk-tuks, in brackets, the open three-wheeled kamikaze taxis, and pretty much every other type of transportation you can imagine, all mooching around various tightly jammed stalls and shops. The smell of hot, spicy food I love so much, blended with the stink of diesel fumes that hung in the air, spluttered out from the rear of the tuk-tuks. By now I was sweating more than a dog in a Chinese restaurant. At that great big yellow thing in the sky started to beat down on the huge melting pot of Bangkok, hurdling an obstacle of a sleeping dog in the doorway. We finally entered into the air-conditioned plaza building. We made our way through the maze of shops and stalls to the second floor, where, if the fortune teller was anything to write home about, was already preparing for our arrival. I'm not quite sure what I was expecting to see. I turned the corner and walked into a small parlour where he resided. I had mixed visions of some small, bald-headed blind guy with an orange robe surrounded by lots of candles. Well, either that or some Merlin warlock-looking character from King Arthur, long white beard, pointy hat, cape and a wand. I couldn't have been further from the truth, as my sweetheart smiled with excitement and exchanged greetings with a rather stern-looking, short, round-faced, round-bellied man smelling of some tropical fruit I couldn't quite recognise. His age, like the fruit, was also difficult to pinpoint. It's always a difficult one guessing a Thai person's age, but my guess would have put him in amongst the late 50s bracket. He was wearing a dirty old t-shirt, a pair of jeans, and minus the pointy hat with the moon and star shapes on it. He turned to face the walking wallet, me. His face brightened in an instant. He turned his palms upwards and, tilting them slightly in a downward motion, he prompted for us to both be seated. I looked around to where his palms of his hands were pointing across from us. Stacked up against the wall were half a dozen or so baby-sized plastic stools. Lifting out a couple, I parked my weary self down. We decided to let my sweetheart do the translating. After a few sawadis, hellos, and one or two brief verbal exchanges, my sweetheart turned to me, her. Dear, fortune teller me. Have grandfather in UK, do you know him? His name Dan. Me. Dan, no, I can't say I do. The psychic scribbled down a few letters on a slip of paper, spun it round and slid it across the table towards me. Oh, done. I corrected my little Thai flower's pronunciation. Yes, I know him, I lied. Truth be known, I had heard of the famous boxer from the 70s with the same name, and if my recollection served me right, he unsuccessfully fought Muhammad Ali for the world title back in the day. Well, it was the only Dunn I had heard of, so to lighten the mood, I tell my sweetheart I know the boxer, Richard Dunn. Without any need for translation, he immediately says very excitedly in his best English, yes, yes, Richard Dunn, my grandfather. His smile was broadening like a Cheshire cat with all the cream. I exchanged a glance with my good lady, who was also smiling from ear to ear. I couldn't help but join in all the smiles. The only difference being behind mine though, I couldn't help thinking there was one slight flaw within his family ancestry. Richard Dunn, or at least the Richard Dunn I was thinking about, would have been born in the mid-40s, at a guess around the same time as the fortune teller Mr. Dunn Jr. Now sat opposite me, I couldn't really let this go. Are you sure? Dunn the boxer who fought Muhammad Ali? I asked. Yes, Richard Dunn, my grandfather, he fight Ali. You know him? More smiles. I did think at the moment that if he couldn't get his history right, how on earth could he possibly have any success with my future? It was one of those moments again while over here in Thailand, I was asked a totally absurd question. It seems somewhere along the way something had been lost in translation. Having gained much experience in the Ask a Stupid Question department over the years, I answered him in an equally senseless way. Yeah, I know him. I also know Santa Claus. Typically Thai and unwilling to admit lack of comprehension, both my sweetheart and Mr. Dunn Jr. gave off a quizzical look accompanied with half a smile and an uncertain nod. It worked a treat. I nodded and smiled back. I thought it best we should move swiftly on to the nitty-gritty of the proceedings, the fee. How come you never see a headline like "Psychic wins the lottery"? I'm convinced this could be a great form of entertainment, but surely it can be harmful when people are unable to sort out what is real and what isn't. For example, sat there watching the twinkle in my sweetheart's eye and her dimpled smile as Mr. Dunn proceeded to inform us both of a special marriage package reading he could perform for us at the special rate of only 500 baht, which told me that he was making a very good living out of the vulnerable people that sat before him. It also occurred to me that just by being there and supporting his cause made me feel I was in many ways encouraging other people who can least afford to spend money on such psychics. I quizzed him. 500 baht? Yes, good price, special price, he answered. My Ray-Bans fell from where they had been perched on the top of my head, landing quite appropriately over the bridge of my nose, where they now conveniently hid my bulging eyeballs. This guy was beginning to grow on me like a colony of E. coli, and I was room temperature meat. Before I had the chance to translate "get stuffed" into Thai, my loved one placed her hand on my knee, caressing it to console me in some way, and as her soft tone of "my penrai, dear, no problem," left her mouth, I decided on this occasion to let it go. After all, I was now intrigued just how wrong he could actually get it, and it seemed worth 500 baht, if not only just for the experience. Without further ado, Mr. Dunn reached over his shoulder and took a large leather book from the bookshelf behind him, and using a small white handkerchief, he blotted the sweat from his brow with one hand and started to fumble through the pages of the book with the other. For the next few minutes or so, they talked. I listened, or rather I pretended to listen, as I allowed my mind to wander. A rich aroma had worked its way up from the ground floor, filling my nostrils with Thai cuisine. It was indeed a nice distraction, until my lady was ready to translate and inform me of our future and hopefully next week's winning lottery numbers. While waiting, another one of my senses was alerted. I could hear music. The gentle tinkering of Thai music started to swell in my ears. I started to drift a little more. Glancing round, my radar was working perfectly as I homed in on a CD stall across from the shop. Thai music played very softly, rather like the Thai language. It just rolled along in a nice, ever so relaxing, therapeutic way. The choice of music was excellent, as if playing it just for my benefit. If the prophet sat before us and had been forced to pick the choice of music for our sitting, he couldn't have done any finer. Suddenly my sweetheart spoke to me. "What time are you born, dear?" "Huh?" I was startled from near sleep. What time I was born? I realised obviously my answer would have some significance as to where Dunn's stubby, almost sausage-like fingers had come to rest deep within the book. "Not sure," I answered. He need time, Naka, please." Forcing a smile, I took a stab. "Dinner time." Tilting her head slightly to one side and closing one eye, she glanced up at the ceiling as she converted my birth date, time and place into Thai. She spoke my birth details with much speed. She's very rarely wrong where the need for any adding or subtracting is concerned. Dunn rummaged around in the desk drawers and produced an old antique looking wooden box. I was impressed. It all looked very professional. Harry Potter, eat your heart out. I half expected an owl to come swooping in and perch on his shoulder. This is until the moment he took from it a bright red plastic stamp and a child's toy ink pad. Removing my sunglasses to get a closer look, I wondered just what cereal packet they had dropped out of. After much line drawing, head scratching and lots of scribbling, later Mr. Dunn eventually sat back in his chair, arms folded across his chest, and giving himself a self-satisfying look, he prepared himself for what he was about to say. I threw my sweetheart a quick glance. Her eyes were now narrowing with keen interest. I joined her gaze towards him. My eyes narrowed, although more with skepticism than interest. He smiled back at us both. He spoke with the wisdom that can only come from experience. I kept on stealing glimpses at my sweetheart. As they talked, she kept on flashing her pearly white teeth back at me. I took it as good news. My head skipped from side to side, back and forth for the next 10 minutes or so as my sweetheart and our mystic guru friend exchanged more Thai chit-chat. As he spoke, she scribbled away making notes. Unable for me to pick up more than just a few odd words here and there, I decided to sit it out, listen to the Thai CD playing over my shoulder and wait for the verdict. Half an hour after entering Mr. Dunn's humble abode, we were saying our goodbyes and making our way out towards the exit, but not before stopping and buying a copy of the CD from the stall across the aisle. I still play it from time to time this day, and it never fails to bring back fond memories of the British heavyweight boxing champion's grandson and my sweetheart's sparkling eyes as he rambled on. So I now hear you ask the all-important question: was I any wiser about my future, our future? Or to use my lovely lady's words, do I believe in something I can't touch? Well, I do believe that my football club will one day return to playing in the English Premier League, and anyone who can believe that will believe anything. Mr. Dunn, our fortune teller, told us that we would be married and have 6 children, the first one being a boy. He told us my wife and I would move to live in the UK. He said we'd work together, we'd be very happy amongst other things. He predicted that, he told us that we would spend a lot of money. Well, he certainly got that one right. I remember thinking as I handed him the 500 baht. And incidentally, we are still playing those lucky numbers that he gave us. We still live in hope. And so on that note, I'll try to end this story on a serious note. If someone were to ask me whether this particular story, our relationship, our marriage, our continued future happiness will truly go on forever and ever, I would say, does anybody really know the answer to that? All I can say is so far so good. I have loved my wife dearly now for 18 years and I believe she feels the same way about me. We are also blessed with our wonderful child, a boy who is now 13 years old. We wait in anticipation for the other 5 to arrive. We are all enjoying life currently here in the north of England, as well as spending time when we can get back to our house in the north of Bangkok. So to sum up, yes, Mr. Dunn did manage to get 1 or 2 things right, though I'm not totally convinced that any truths lie within his box of tricks. I really would like to think so, even not just to give this particular story a magical ending. Unfortunately, however, the jury is still out. One thing I would say in my wife's favour is that we are all creatures of reason until the lights go out. Well, most of us. It doesn't have to take a door to creak or the eyes of a portrait to start to follow you around the room before you realise a feeling of unsettlement. Like children watching a scary movie, we as adults may soon become unsettled when we get the feeling of uncertainty towards an illness, some misfortune, a failure, or simply maybe just a fear of the unknown. If you can escape that fear, the unknown, or better still avoid it in the first place, then it would be wiser to do so, right? Well, that's my wife's logic anyway, and she's Thai, so I have to agree with her, or at least pacify her with a smile and a courtesy nod. If you can't beat them, join them. Welcome to Thailand. Okay, wasn't that a great story? So I'm going to finish now with 2 short stories. So this is story number 3 out of the 4. I am Alan from Canada, 58 years old, and back in March 2020 I was on my third trip to Thailand. I left Vancouver and arrived in Bangkok on March 1st, 2020. I'd heard a little bit about everything that is going on right now and that had started in China, but I decided to go on my trip anyway. My plan was to split the 3-week vacation between Bangkok Pattaya and Hua Hin. I like to meet a few girls on Thai Friendly a few weeks before arriving in Thailand. Then I can chat with them on the Line app, and when I arrive I have a few options in each city. I've had good success with this on previous trips and have been able to weed out potential problems. This was how I met Nit. She was very attractive, a woman, aged 42, and worked massage in Bangkok. We hit it off together online and had chatted for about 1 month before I arrived in Bangkok. We did video calls and I liked her style and her English was fairly good. We met on my 3rd night in Bangkok at a BTS station. After she finished work, we caught a cab to a seafood restaurant that she recommended. We had a great time getting to know each other and had a great meal and beers. Both slightly drunk, we caught a cab back to my hotel where she stayed until the morning. We made plans to meet the next night and we did almost the same thing as the first night. Each evening the meal and the beers were under 1,000 baht. I told Nit that I was leaving the next day for Pattaya. We went back to my hotel again, but around 2 a.m. she got out of bed, dressed and said she had to leave. I found this strange as she had stayed the previous night until the morning. I said goodbye to her and I left the next day for Pattaya, not intending to see her again. A lot of Thais believe in ghosts, and Nit later explained to me that's why she left the hotel. That's why she left the hotel abruptly. The second night she had a dream with ghosts and they told her to leave, so she did. My plan was to stay in Pattaya for a week and then take the ferry across to Hua Hin for the 3rd and final week of my vacation. In Pattaya, things started getting crazy with the situation and my return flights to Vancouver were cancelled. I stayed a week in Pattaya and had a great time. I then took the ferry to Hua Hin. By this time, Nit had contacted me. She said she could get off work and wanted to join me. Why not, I thought. The next day she took a minibus and met me in Hua Hin. Without getting into too many details about my return flights, they were cancelled and rebooked and cancelled again, but I was able to get out of Thailand on March the 19th on a flight that was about double the original cost, but I was happy to have a flight and got out of the country and the crazy situation. If I was retired, I may have stayed, but that was not an option at that time. When Nit arrived in Hua Hin, she was in a party mood and she loved the beach. We had a great week together as the rest of the world started to shut down. We explored Hua Hin, rented a motorbike and toured the surrounding area. The hotel we stayed at was older but right next to the night market. It had a large balcony and was 5 minutes walk to the beach. The hotel did not have a safe and this concerned me as I had a fair amount of cash with me. I kept the cash in my suitcase and fortunately I never had an issue with that whatsoever. We returned to Bangkok for one more night before I returned to Canada. Things were definitely weird as businesses were closed and most inbound flights were already cancelled. Things were escalating out of control. Nit stayed with me at my hotel on the last night. The next day my flight was not leaving until midnight. After checking out of the hotel, we decided to go back to Nit's room. I had a bunch of time to kill before the flight and I was interested to see what her 3,000 baht a month apartment looked like. I'm not sure if I will see Nit again. We have continued to talk over the last year online and in that time I have sent her 1,000 baht 6 times. She doesn't ask me for money, but I know these amounts help her. After seeing her place, I have a very good understanding of what her life is like. Before all of the current problems, she told me that she was doing 5 or more massages a day. Now it's down to 1 or 2. Some days she doesn't get any. As you know, these girls work off commission, so if there's no work coming in, then there's no money coming in either. Last month, Nit grabbed a motorbike taxi. The guy crashed and she hurt her hand and foot and broke her phone. No broken bones, just grief for someone who has a terrible year already. She's had a terrible year already. She found out afterwards the motorbike driver has a drinking problem and was known to the police. She filed a report, but nothing was done. I was very fortunate to have Nit with me during the crisis. She helped me with flights, and get back to Bangkok and get out of the country before the full closure. I hope tourists can return in numbers soon. The struggles these people are going through is terrible, with no help from anyone. Such lovely people to be left to struggle and cope with no money coming in. It's a real shame that makes me very sad when I think of Nit in Bangkok. Okay, and on with our last story. This video is certainly turning out to be a real marathon now, but this is a very, very short story. I was going to read this out next week, but as it's so short, I thought I'd just put it onto the end of this video. So I hope you enjoy this one. Hi Peter, I enjoy your stories. They bring back great memories from Thailand, and I have lived in Bali for many years and travel frequently to Thailand, Cambodia and Vietnam, etc. On one of my trips alone to Pattaya, maybe around 2016, I enjoyed wandering the beach area, and many soys away from the beach in a quiet lane past Second Road, I came across a medium-sized bar with about a dozen ladies in it. One extremely attractive lady invited me in for a drink. I gave my apologies as I said I don't drink alcohol. She replied that she's happy to make me another drink or give me a soft drink. I suggested coffee. She happily went out of her way to oblige. We chatted for some time as I was the only customer, and this lady was an absolute stunner. After about an hour, I asked about the staff in the bar. I politely asked if any ladyboys worked there, as I just wondered what they looked like, as I had never seen one and had been told they looked just like the Thai girls. She smiled and says, yes, there is one working in this bar, and asked me, can you see her? She's here right now. I looked around and I didn't see any obvious signs of a ladyboy in the bar. After a minute or two, she put me out of my misery and told me she was the ladyboy. I was totally shocked and highly embarrassed, but she took it as a compliment. This lady was the most gorgeous woman, beautiful features and well groomed. She seemed to be well educated, great English and intelligent. I thought I would be able to pick out a ladyboy by the Adam's apple, hands, feet, voice, etc. I felt like such an idiot. It just shows how easy it is to misjudge people. I felt really privileged to meet her, and I enjoyed her company on several more occasions before I returned home. I hope you can use this story. If so, just change my name, please. Keep up the good work. You're not bad for a pom. Cheers, Rick. So he's calling me a pom, which is a nickname that the Australians give the British. So obviously I'm guessing that he's Australian. So thanks for that, Rick. Okay, so that's the fourth and final story for this week. And as I've said, at the moment, I've exhausted all the stories. We've had them going for a year. If I get one or two stories in the week, then there'll be another video next Saturday. If not, I'm not sure what I'm going to be doing. But the live streams are beginning to get popular. So I will be back this evening at 9 PM UK time. I hope you'll come and join in the chat. It was a lot of fun last week. And until then, guys, thanks very much for watching this video, and I'll catch you later this evening.